So folks, on July 24th, 2024, there were three big events. First, there was Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress. Then there was a Trump campaign rally in North Carolina. And then the evening climax with a speech from the White House by Joseph Biden, president.
We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization. It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life. They call Israel a colonialist state. Don't they know that the land of Israel is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob prayed, where Isaiah and Jeremiah preached, and where David and Solomon ruled? The land of Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people. It's always been our home. It will always be our home.
Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, not only inserted himself directly into American politics, but proved once again that he's a Jewish supremacist and fascist. His audience were like trained monkeys, bobbing up and down on almost every sentence, applauding. His beliefs are sincere and frozen and permanent and unchangeable. His tactical thinking neglects nuance, intuition, or empathy. His performative style is that of a bulldozer. No self-reflection or self-criticism. It's full steam ahead for Netanyahu. He won't even admit the most profound intelligence failure under his leadership of the IDF and the government on October 7th. He's under investigation for other criminal activity, but he knows that as soon as the war ends in Gaza, he will be investigated for all of those issues for a long, long time. But he holds no allegiance to the rule of law and takes no responsibility, and instead lashes out at his accusers. The International Court of Justice found against him on charges of war crimes, and yet he piously attempted to fool the world by lashing out and spinning lies about the kosher tactics of the IDF in Gaza. The Israeli public, much of it, has finally turned against him, especially on the hostages and on the lack of a ceasefire. Well, let's get back to the terminology. He's clearly authoritarian, with a fist-pounding ideology that is linked to fascism, and it's a reminder of it. Perhaps he's most comparable to Vladimir Putin, but it's a fair description to call him a fascist. And for those of us who could never imagine a Jewish fascist, I have a story from Jerusalem in 1984. It was shortly after the Oslo Agreement, the historic effort by Bill Clinton to bring negotiation between the Israeli government led by Rabin with Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO. And shortly after that, I went to observe a right-wing demonstration in the heart of Jerusalem that I knew was going to be anti-Yitzhak Rabin because of his willingness and ability to work with Clinton about a peace agreement. Well, it went from bad to worse. Signs held of Rabin and comparing him to Hitler were prominent. Of course, I was outraged and concerned. And 1 year later, almost exactly 1 year later, Rabin was assassinated by a Jewish religious right-wing extremist, an Israeli. in Israel in 1985. And nobody has really replaced him. When Netanyahu lashed out at the tsunami of anti-Semitism, which is true, it's poured out all over the world, including here. And it's been an avalanche since October 7th. But of course, he didn't take any responsibility for it, despite the obvious, at least partial, cause and effect. Then the final insult to American democracy. He gratuitously attacked the anti-Israel demonstrators or anti-Netanyahu demonstrators exercising their First Amendment rights outside the Capitol. In short, a disaster with ominous overtones in this year of angst and trepidation. Disturbing analogies are patently obvious to Donald Trump, and it's a warning to wake up America and defend democracy.
Well, you know that. That's what happens. That's what happens. These are nasty people, the Democrats, so we better beat them or we're not going to have a country left. You're not going to have a country left. So now we have a new victim to defeat. Lion Kamala Harris. Lion. L-Y-I-N apostrophe. The most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history. By the way, they did a poll. She was rated the worst vice president in history. I've never seen that poll before, but that's the poll. For 3.5 years, Lion Kamala Harris has been the ultra-liberal driving force behind every single Biden catastrophe. She is a radical left lunatic who will destroy our country. If she ever gets the chance to get into office, we're not going to let that happen. You know, I was supposed to be nice. They say something happened to me when I got shot. I became nice. And when you're dealing with these people, they're very dangerous people. When you're dealing with them, you can't be too nice. You really can't be. So,
You know, everything that can be said about Trump has already been said and written. There's nothing unique about it. There's nothing original to say in terms of, let's say, the facts about him. But the thing to do is look at the larger picture. Well, one of the larger pictures is he only mocks people. He doesn't debate. He holds up no policy at all. None. We were just watching a speech last night that he gave at a campaign rally in North Carolina. There was not one word about what he wants to do. It was only about mocking Biden, Kamala Harris, and so forth. So he's beyond narcissistic, beyond superficial, beyond lying and so forth. But what I want to talk about is the obvious values, the moral compass that he and his followers have none of. And this is a moral compass not by liberals or left or right. These are our values that are mainstream, that are taught to kids as young as 4 by parents, teachers, athletic coaches, and so on. And they're expected to be internalized. Now, of course, not everybody does, but people who are against or just openly violate them cannot be taken seriously as leaders. Like I wonder, being Jewish, I wonder the interesting paradox of a guy who has hosted neo-Nazis for dinner in Mar-a-Lago. And in that speech where he said, "Stand down, Proud Boys." Again, a fascist anti-Semitic group. It is true that Biden decided to run for president after the incredible riots that took over the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, when the alt-right, the alternative right-wing groups, showed up in Charlottesville and held rallies. And there's a disturbing, outrageous image of guys marching with lit torches lit torches, yelling, "Jews won't replace us." Nobody knew at the time what that meant, but it turns out there's a replacement theory that people like that believe that, quote, the white race or the white Christian race is going to run out of being a majority. And maybe that's true, but Jews make up less than 2% of the population. It's not because of Jews. So it's obviously, insane propaganda. But Biden has always had a strong affinity with Jews, the Jewish people, Israel, and so forth. I think it comes from his father. And he was justifiably outraged and decided to run for president. Now, Trump has made fun of that. But what did Trump do when they interviewed him the day after? He said, well, there's good people on both sides. There's good people on both sides. And I think that was what, firmly made Biden run. Unsportsmanlike conduct. Now, this is a really good one because athletes, coaches, parents, kids, they know what sportsmanlike conduct is. For example, when a game ends, one team has lost, another team has won. What do? Cause a rumble? Go into, mad violence against each other? What do in response to that? Do they pretend that they didn't lose? Refuse to get off the field? That's what Trump's about. No, the opposite. The teams line up and they walk past each other and they give each other a high five. The victorious team and the losing team. They're showing goodwill. They're showing sportsmanlike conduct. Isn't this a no-brainer? A no-brainer to ask this fundamental question. Would Trump engage in sportsmanlike conduct?
I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this: we are a great nation because we are good people. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. It's the best way to unite our nation. There is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
Here's the main takeaway that I have about the speech. Besides the fact that it laid out a lot of policies that he'd done and ones that he hopes will be done in the future, and it laid out some specific policies and outcomes of things from getting control,
Of things from?
Yeah. Of things from dealing with big pharma, to making healthcare accessible, to raising standard of living, to closing the wealth gap between blacks and whites. All of those things happened under his administration, to also appointing a black woman to the Supreme Court. And interestingly, one of the more radical, let's say, proposals that Biden mentioned was about enlarging, reforming the Supreme Court. That's a real tough one. But we're going to need that in order to overcome this incredibly right-wing court that's blocking everything. But in the meantime, the biggest difference, obvious, there's a million differences between Trump and Biden. The biggest one is about optimism versus pessimism. Which one do you think is the pessimist? It's Trump. he only talks about disaster. In his 2016 inauguration speech, I was blown away by how dark, how ominous, how without any positive uplift the speech was, in contrast to any other inauguration that I've heard about or seen. Biden, of course, did the opposite. And on July 24th, he furthered that because he has trust in the American people. He didn't mention Trump's name once. He didn't mock anybody. He didn't attack any individual. He was standing for principles like democracy, like fairness, like liberty. He cited people like Benjamin Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, the Constitution. And he was talking about that Americans, we have done so many things right. We've gotten through so many bad times. And he has trust. He has trust in the American public, the American people, that we'll get through this, that we will salvage, save, protect, defend our democracy. That's a man who holds deep, deep beliefs and is not trying to be a strong man, a dictator like Trump. He's trying to be a human being who happens to be president and wants to do good for as many people as he can.